Andrew, I'm happy that you said yes to our little interview here, and I think everyone is really interested in what you're saying. I've seen a few of your interviews, I've seen a few podcasts, but this one here is not too technical in the moment and not too business-like. This is more personal journey we are trying to discover. So I hope that you are taking a step into the time machine, go back and take me or take us with you, and maybe you can give us a short intro who you are for those who don't know, and then I can start asking a few questions.
Sure. So I'm Andrew, CEO of RoboStrategy. RoboStrategy is one of the first publicly listed venture capital funds. And we're the only fund exclusively focused on investing in leading private robotic companies, private robotic and AI companies. And so that's anything to do with robotics, including companies within the supply chain, including companies that build software for robotics, and including companies that are also vertically integrated and really do everything.
Hmm. I think this is very important for the moment in time we are. And I just came back from Davos Tech Summit where there were a lot of robots outside in the city. People could really interact with it and talk to it. So looking forward to this later on. But maybe we can start early on and you can tell me a bit how it was to grow up and who you've been surrounded with, what you've been interested in, and we can spend a bit of time there.
Yeah, so growing up, I guess I was interested in science in the early part of my life. Studied biology in college. I was never really like a A+ student. It was like, moderately above average, B+, A- type of student. But was fortunate to have, I guess, parents that weren't tiger parents, like some of my other peers, and it gave me a lot of freedom to, explore the world however I wanted to and spend my time, a lot of how I wanted to. And what's funny is a lot of that time ended up being spent playing video games. Which a lot of parents might say is like not a great use of time, but it's actually like, looking back, I think it was a great way to kind of train your mental facilities and, you know, uh, I think there's a lot of important skills that you pick up from it, like critical thinking and like long horizon planning, and navigating game theory, for example. So I would say like that was probably like an important part of my life, early life, that has probably shaped my later stages of life. It's not like I play video games anymore, but I definitely feel like thinking in similar ways has helped to shape it. What else? I mean.
And just a second. So, I mean, I think nowadays I see more and more VCs about if you have a founder that played video games early on, invest in them immediately. Communication is a big topic, right? When you play a video game, and I mean, depends on what kind of game you play. But just to spend one more second there, have you been surrounded in your friends and neighbors or people at school a little bit earlier than university? Where you were sharing this kind of hobby, or was that because when you said you were interested in science and you also said you played video games, I'm always trying to understand, was there something that had been influenced by parents or friends, siblings, or was that something that you were, uh, yeah, you found your peers online?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I think kids within our community and like the real world were also playing video games. It's like every boy does, huh? NBA 2K, Maple Story, Halo, Call of Duty, Warcraft, Dota. There's literally like like every single like popular game back then that you could think of. I was playing, or friends were playing, and I had friends in school that played, but then also good friends online. Yeah. I don't know if I ever met them like some other people do, where you meet up with your online friends, but
Hmm.
they're guys that you would routinely talk to every single day after school, and hop into the same lobby and start the games.
You said that tiger parents, there's a lot of expectation and also a bit of pressure there. Uh, was that something that you felt was like, did you really felt this? Because very often these kind of things come to you as you grow older and you look back, what kind of situation this was, or did you really felt in that moment that there was some sort of expectation?
No, I think my parents were on the chill end compared to the other my other peers. that maybe like grew up with like, parents from Asia or China. They, they didn't expect me to fail. Like I think that would have been bad. But I didn't have to study like 7 hours a day. But I think, maybe growing up with those peers that were excelling or, had expectations for themselves was enough to at least be motivated as well. Because you are who you surround yourself with. But it wasn't to the extent where it was like, it got you into just kind of like textbook thinking, which is, I think, like can limit creativity. Um, it was more so, I think, good way to maybe teach like hard work and just learning about the core subjects you need to learn about in school. And that's enough.
Uh, so where did you grow up?
I grew up on the East Coast in New Jersey. Yeah, in America.
And I mean, I always trying to find out if I said this earlier. You said your parents, uh, like those things had been influencing you very early on. I give you an example. I had a few people on the podcast that are, my parents are engineers. I always wanted to be an engineer. I always put together like a toaster or some radio. And or my
Mhm.
brother was. Were there other influences in your life where you think this could, this played a role in what I'm doing now, or
Yeah,
throughout?
there's a few things. I think like in some of the video games, you think about RuneScape or you think about maybe Neopets, like there were global markets within these games. And the items within the games, they had value. You could trade them for money, and RuneScape is for GP. And with anytime you have markets, right, there are, strategies that you can use to generate more gold or whatever points within those markets. And so for RuneScape, right, or, for even for Neopets, like you could buy items like lobbies, right? The lobsters for like 100, and maybe you could sell them for 105, right? Just clip 5%. Or sometimes you could sell items, trade items for items, but those items might have been priced in a way where you're generating a profit or you're getting a good deal. And so I guess like, in some sense, like interacting with those markets, like teaches you how to think about value in a way and how value can be exchanged. Um, where I think maybe the science part played in was the scientific method is all about experimentation, and you have a hypothesis in science, and then you have to go out and design an experiment, and you have to design it in a way where you like specifically test for one variable and make sure there's no other confounding variables. And then you prove out whether that is real or it's like fake, right? It's validated or you don't. And both can be useful. Like some scientists get mad if, they don't validate their hypothesis. But of course, like if you validate that it's not true, well, then that provides you information around the real world. And so I would say like coming from like a science background teaches you to really trying to like understand the truth of the world and also how to like analyze a situation or a scenario where you're not sure if something is factual or not, but you have to figure out how to right like how to find if it's factual or not. And right for science experiments, you can do it in a lab, but when it comes to investing, maybe it's like by verifying by talking to independent experts. But you don't take people for like their face value, right? Like you don't take something for truth just because it comes from somebody from a high position. It
A
has
lot
to
of
make
people
sense
do.
from like a first principles perspective, right? From a logical perspective.
Yeah, but I mean, but a lot of people do, right? I mean,
Mm.
I see this very often. Yeah, but Dr. So and so said it, right? So the
Yeah.
title is putting them in a position where you assume that it's right because they said it.
Mhm.
It is interesting how you combine two things that in a first step, without going deeper into it, seem something that are not belong together, but they do, and you can apply the way of thinking onto other things. The to close that chapter maybe, it seems very funny that as a parent you would think, okay, so this is a video game, waste of time, but now you can see actually this is some sort of entrepreneurial school, right? Entrepreneurial course. So playing a game, and as you said, you do need to figure out what items to buy, what to change, what to trade, and you can actually see I mean, was that something that interested you very early on, and you very early on you knew, okay, so this is something I'm interested in, and I'm also good at, like even it's just a video game, but being an entrepreneur in that sense.
Um, yeah, I mean, I never really aspired to be an entrepreneur, to be honest. It just kind of like so happened that I did like pretty well in crypto in my 20s, and investing was fun. It was almost like a game in a sense, and hired some other people to kind of help me with investing and like navigating liquid markets and venture markets. Um, it was just fun, right? It's like there's no right answer for a lot of things in the investing world, right? There's no obvious like this is the formula that you need to use. Although in some cases, like if for like something that's like really established, like investing in I don't know like F&B restaurants where the growth is like very um static year to year. And there can be like kind of like standard formulas in which how you would evaluate those businesses, but that's not really fun, right? It's like the fun part is f finding fields where there is no kind of like set textbook in terms of like like this is the right way to invest, or this is the right way to like size your bets or whatever. That is fun. It's almost like creating like you have to create a new framework for understanding how to value things or understanding how the growth of those assets are going to occur over time.
I see you're really thinking things through and trying to articulate this. Really appreciate it. I mean, going to the next step, why studying I mean, you said that you studied biology, right? So is that it's not something that I mean, I really would like to understand how this decision being made,
Mm,
right? I talk to people a lot, they reach out to me, and there's so many topics I'm interested in. Which path should I go down to, right? When I talk to students, and they said, there's so many interests that I have. For example,
yeah.
I would like to do some stuff with hardware, but also like programming, and so how did you make the decision back then, and what to sit down for a couple of years and get a degree in?
Yeah, those are all interesting subjects. I think for me, like why biology? Well, you grow up and then, like you develop as a human, as in like you get taller and like you go through puberty or whatever, and then, you get sick sometimes, and it's just like it's kind of like not clear when you're growing up, like how all of that works. It's like how do I get sick? And then how does my immune system figure out like what are like the bad bacteria to fight against, and then like how does it actually go away, and like how does like your immune system not like attack your own body, like how come you grow two arms instead of like five arms, right? Like there's so many like I guess like mysteries around like the development of biology that I was just curious about learning about. And yeah, that was the best way to do it. And I'm glad I did it. I don't really apply it, like the knowledge of those specific topics in my everyday work today, but I think it was, yeah, useful in terms of learning how to learn in some sense.
So really driven by curiosity.
Hmm.
So I really would like to understand what this is all about, and this was enough for you to say, let's do this on a deeper level.
Yeah. What do you mean on a deeper level?
No, I
As
mean
in,
like not only because some people would say, watch some documentary or figure out some questions, but like I would like to really get understanding about this. So I really would like to get a degree in that to be able to read more about this and work together with other people trying to figure out things. So because it's a decision, right? And really, I would like to go to university and get a degree in biology. So I really find, for me, it's very fascinating because it's a decision that somehow, for many people, not necessarily for everyone, but for many people, this is a, life decision. You get a degree and then you get a job and then you're gonna stick with this for a very long period of time. So this is the reason why I was asking.
uh,
Curiosity drove it this way.
curiosity, and I actually did do better in high school in terms of like my grades in biology and just like, navigating those courses compared to things like math or physics. And so I guess like you just do maybe you just tend to do better in things that you find more interesting. And so that was probably a good signal, although, I did go through a period of time where I was trying to figure out like what like any other college student, like what do you want to major in? I don't think it was immediately clear. But yeah, and then there were, I think certain things along with majoring in biology, some courses that I took were pretty instrumental in like creating like good critical thinking skills. So for example, had taken some like nutritional science classes. I got really into evidence-based fitness when I was in college, which means basically like how do you best like exercise or like maintain your fitness from an evidence-based perspective, as in like what does like the scientific literature say? And there's like a whole host of studies on like a lot of different topics on like nutrition or, like resistance training. And a lot of those studies, funny enough, can give you like completely opposite answers. Like a study can say, hey, look, eating a lot of fat is bad for you. And another study can say, hey, eating fat is good for you. It will actually increase your longevity. Or some studies can say, look, eating carbs is like really bad for you. You should really limit your carb intake. And it, you do like you have to figure out like, well, why are these studies saying different things, right? You have to look into their like the methodology of the design of the experiments. You have to understand like how do they come to the conclusions. And then like, well, somebody's wrong, right? If there's two different conclusions that are like complete opposite of each other, you have to figure out why they're wrong. Um, and yeah, that was really important. And what was crazy is we had to write books around we had to write papers like analyzing different well-known books. And there's this one book that was assigned called the China Study, which was basically touting the benefits of a completely like plant-based diet and how, eating meat is just like awful for you and it's going to make you die early. And this was published by I think like a Harvard nutritionist. And you go through that book and you kind of like go through the studies that he cites and you look at the studies and you see like does this match up with like what is he saying, and you look at like are there confounding variables, or you look at like are there way like reasons why this study like shouldn't exactly be extrapolated in the way that he's extrapolating it. And it's like it's like you come to the conclusion that, well, okay, like these Harvard professors or whatever, like they don't know what they're talking about either, like because yeah, I mean, you can just like apply logic and figure out like why this is shouldn't be like this observation isn't correct. Um, so yeah, I think that's really helpful in investing, right? Because you have to just navigate through a lot of different various claims, and some people can make big claims, and sometimes they're right, and then sometimes they're wrong. You have to figure out like what's wrong, what's right.
I'm into this claiming, and especially in nowadays robotics times, and the hype that is around these companies and claims. Really would like to dive. We will dive into this later on. The just for the record, I'm pro carbs. I love carbs. It's
Yeah,
it is I'm pro carbs. So whatever would
if it fits
be,
your macros, right? Like
yeah.
just watch your calorie intake.
Um, You finished the degree. What happened afterwards? What yeah, you were mentioning the word crypto early on, but maybe you can take us through like finishing the degree and what happened afterwards.
Yeah, I finished a degree and I worked in consulting for 2 or 3 years. Um, right, did some work on the commercial side for, different like healthcare, biopharmaceutical companies. Um, got some skill sets in Excel modeling and presentations and, like the corporate world. And then kind of jumped into crypto because, I mean, it was exciting, it was new, and like there was like a new way to transfer value that like didn't require like the traditional financial rails. And so there was this whole dream about like recreating finance from first principles through this completely new decentralized network that wasn't beholden to like any, centralized powers, like the Fed or like the banking elites that exist today. And um, like did well with, I guess, like DeFi coins early on. But 2 or 3 years ago, kind of got what I'd consider like maybe a bit bored of the space or jaded about the space, because
Sorry,
I think,
but when was this that this started for you?
oh, in 2017, 2018 was, when I kind of went full time into crypto. Yeah.
Hmm. Almost
Yeah.
10 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Almost 10 years ago. Um, so yeah, I spent enough time in the field, and robotics is great because it reminds me a lot about the early days of crypto in the sense that it's very multidisciplinary, right? You have to learn about like mechanical engineering, like electrical engineering, like battery design, like physical AI. So it's like there are so many different topics that I think you have to figure out how do I understand and how do I put it all together. And it was kind of like a similar thing with crypto early on, where instead of like those topics, you were talking about maybe like decentralized governance or decentralized finance, cryptography, uh, and like those like very kind of like separate, complicated topics were all kind of like interwoven into the crypto world, and that's what made it really exciting and interesting.
I mean, but there's a difference between, oh, not difference, but is a long way for someone who's coming from the biology part, is doing a bit of um, yeah, consultancy, and then doing well in crypto and doing this for a while, as you said, successful, and then deciding from all the topics that you could. I mean, obviously, as you said, they're both multidisciplinary, but still, was it something specific that you said, yeah, let's dive deeper into this one.
Oh, for crypto or for robotics?
Robotics.
Yeah, I mean, I think the moment for me was a friend showed me this company, Figure AI.
Hmm.
And I watched a few videos of what they were building, and I was like, oh, wow, this is, well, one, this team is legitimate, and two, robots are finally going to be a thing. Like, humanoids were always a sci-fi thing, and now it's going to come to reality. And it was like such unlike any other kind of like venture capital company or opportunity I had looked at before, but it just made sense. Um, yeah.
But I mean, if you don't mind sharing this with us, but there's, I mean, we all have seen the videos and been excited, but then there's this step you do need to take, and this is what I'm trying to figure out. Like, you know what? Let's do something. You know what is happening today with RoboStrategy and what it is today. I mean, the idea and how this got together, and then actually not only having the idea and playing around in your head, but actually taking action. Like, okay, how can we figure this out? How can we do those steps? Getting the right people with a certain knowledge at certain topics. I'm really curious how this all come together for this for you.
Yeah, so maybe like going back to Figure. So, after researching that company, decided to make, the biggest venture investment of my career, put around 19 million into the Series B. Previously, we were investing, a few hundred K to a few million at most. And so it was a really significant investment. But kind of like during the process, um, talk to other what I consider like venture experts because we had never done anything in that space or really anything in deep tech or um yeah in that world before and most investors or pretty much all of them told me not to invest and so I think that was well first I just thought I thought I was missing something I thought it was wrong and so but like doing a lot more research realized that it wasn't wrong we weren't wrong it was just there was a bias against robotics which had never previously created venture scale outcomes and from there I kind of realized okay wow there's this field is going to grow tremendously it's really fascinating and it's really early as well, right? It's good to be early. Timing matters, and that's when we decided to just kind of go all into robotics and pivot. And right, like we try to get as smart as we could on it, but like I found myself asking a bunch of people all the time for help, diligencing these projects because it was definitely out of my domain and I was learning a lot online, but like it doesn't like you just have to talk to experts. And one of the people I talked to was Scott Walter, who's now on our team. And I found him because I had what was it? Seen his stuff on X because I was looking for humanoid experts on YouTube and X, and he was one of the few ones that were posting on there. And so when we were, looking into Apptronic, we were talking to Chris Camillo.
No, no, wait a second, because for you it's so casual, and I love the way you look like while you're saying this, so calm, so relaxed. So the ticket number that you were signing earlier on was, I don't know, I think you said something 150K, 50K, 150K, right?
It was like a million or something. Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
that was going to be like decent size ticket for us as
And
well.
now and then very casually you're telling me that you invest like 90 million.
Yeah, that was it
So,
was a big jump
so
for us.
yeah, no, it's just maybe it's because you're so much into the topic that you are not realizing what kind of a jump this is, right? So for
Mhm.
me, not being an investor, not being surrounded by these kind of numbers, I mean, I talk to startups, I help startups to do a bit of fundraising, but like the jump from this number to like this number, which is out of this here is that it's a huge thing, right? And even like being able to get this number in the first place is crazy. I mean, I'm European, so Americans think bigger, but how were you able to manage to get this number in the first place? I mean, maybe I'm too naive or too stupid, but please, I'm very curious to hear how this got together because this is crazy.
Oh, I mean, honestly, it was like I didn't have a formula for it. I just wanted to invest as much as I could. And I didn't even invest directly because I mean, that 19 million was definitely enough to do a direct to cap table investment, but I decided to kind of like size up really at the last minute when the round was closing. And I didn't know Brett at the time. I had known Logan on the team. And, I basically, throughout the process had found four different SPVs that were investing in the figure, and I just asked for, as much as I could to invest in all of them. So that's how we came to the 19 million number. I was just like, this is like reminded me of Bitcoin really early on. It was a once in a lifetime opportunity, and so it's very rare that you come across those, right? Like once every 5 years, once a decade type of thing. And when you come across those, I learned you got to swing hard.
So you did everything in your power. You called everyone and says like we do need to do this. I need to do this, and then this is this is the magic behind it.
Yeah, so I found out about one SPV at first through a friend that, runs a lot of SPVs. And then through my research, trying to figure out more about this company and get views from other friends or, even inviting other friends to invest, right? They kind of like work through their network and they introduced me to other SPV managers, and it just turned out there were a lot of SPVs going on for Figure AI. And sometimes that's bearish, right? When it's like, well, why are there so many SPVs? Why aren't all the tier one VCs gobbling this up, right? Like there should be no access for everybody else. Usually it's like not a great signal, but I think as you've seen, like the traditional tier one VCs, right? Like they're not always right. They're not always on top of everything. And it was the same thing with SpaceX. There's a huge SPV market for SpaceX. And now before they went public, right? Like those SPVs went 5 layers deep, 6 layers deep. It was pretty insane. And they had to raise via SPVs because there was just not enough interest or belief from the traditional venture community that, the space market could be a really big thing. And it was very capital intensive as well. And so, right, like you had a lot of individuals that were investing through these SPVs, and it was like, an incredible outcome that, in some sense they made it better decisions than like the traditional funds out there. And so it does happen. That happened with, I think, Grok as well, that got acquired by NVIDIA, huge SPVs for those for what was it, Cerebus, for Anthropic and OpenAI. There's big SPV markets for them for XAI. And so I guess like venture investing has started to get democratized a little bit. And yeah, there's just kind of like there's more competition for it. It's not completely democratized because you have to get access to the SPVs in the first place, which means you need to know some venture investor that knows the company. Um, but that's kind of, I guess, what we're changing with RoboStrategy as well, where you can just buy it on the public markets.
B Before we dive into that one, because I think this is what the majority of people are really curious about. Um, if you don't mind me asking, I mean, there's a few decisions that had been made in what we just covered in I don't know, 30 minutes. Um, in those moments where you do need to make a decision and you think, because every decision has consequences for the majority of people, not everyone, but and not everyone cares about the consequences, but um, how was that? Is that you're asking friends, you just go for a jog? You said a few times now that you, and this shows your education, I guess. You did your research, right? So you did your homework, but there's still this part of uncertainty, right? And how do you? I try to with this podcast, I try to figure out how to how to behave in these kind of situations, how to go through the struggle, how to go through this, and what to do. And I really would like to ask you how did you go through that to those difficult, interesting, challenging times where you do need to make a decision, right? 90 million is not something. So
Yeah, I mean, it was really like a sprint over the course of 2 weeks to learn everything I could about, humanoid and in the robotic space, which before then I had like zero knowledge of. So it was literally at the first just like Google, watching YouTube videos on X, right? Like reading articles. Um, and like thankfully, like Scott puts a great amount of information out there and learned a lot from watching his content. Um, and it's analyzing the backgrounds of some of these people because I mean there are some questions I think we just I didn't have enough time to even figure out, like, how does robot learning work, like how do you train these robot foundation models, what is the best way to train them, like what is the right approach, or like you can't say something is right or wrong 100% of the time, right? But you as an investor you assign probabilities, but it's kind of hard to assign these probabilities, like what is the right research training approach when you just know nothing about the field. And so you have to sometimes just like go a step above and just look at, well, who's on the team, who's leading these research efforts. And he had gotten right people from Google DeepMind who I would say had the biggest and like the most well established team of like robot foundation model researchers. And Corey Lynch, who was on the team, was a part of some like the early robot foundation model papers that came out from Google back in I think like 2022. um and so right, like, and the other people on the team, right, they came from uh Tesla, from Boston Dynamics, from like the Apple Car program, I believe. And so it was the right profile of I think people that you would want to develop a humanoid robotics company. And the fact that Brett had put all these people together in the course of a year or so was amazing. I think like everything just kind of flows back to the decisions of the people within the company. And at the end of the day, the founder, right, is who recruits those people. And so that was probably like one of the heaviest signals that I leaned upon. And then just also like looking at his background previously, founding this talent this talent recruiting platform, where I think that's like you can probably extrapolate that you learn some skills around how to find the best people in the world. And then his previous company, his company after that was Archer, which was basically he was inventing flying cars, which is not an easy task to do. And it's not like it failed, but like the company SPACed and most SPACs died, but that SPAC was still trading between $5 to $10 billion. And so from like cursory research, he was a guy that had a rare skill set of being able to attract the best people, and then also being able to like innovate in hardware, in creating like completely new mechanical designs that like previously were just impossible, or just people like they just completely changed the capabilities of how machines worked. Um, so that like those were probably like one of the most compelling characteristics, and also the speed, right? Like they got the robot up and running and able to interact with some voice commands within around a year and a half. And you look at some other competitor companies and how fast it took them to do it, and it was multiple years longer. And right, like when you're talking about building a great company, like it's everything has to be really fast. You have to be all in. You have to be, yeah, just executing at that level, which we looked at the other competitors, and it didn't seem like that was the case for them. right? They were smart guys and they were innovating, but they didn't have that entrepreneurial Elon Musk type energy.
But this is more the research part of the decision-making process, right? So for me, what I'm still interested in, and maybe you do have an answer to that, is there's still the emotional risk. Somebody has to make a decision, right? You said you're trying to inform yourself as much as possible to gain the knowledge and to get the right people to
Yeah,
inform you and to educate you. But
yeah.
it's still in the very end, it's you, Andrew, who, right, one of the people who make the decision. Let's do this, right? And this is something you do need to have guts to do it. And I want to understand. I mean, you're so calm about this, but you do need to make the decision, right? And was that something that was you were struggling with, or do you have such an analytic mind and such a like being so calm about this kind of decision that it was just a logical consequence for you?
Yeah, so like as an investor, you need to be able to evaluate risk and reward. And so I thought when other investors weren't doing the deal that um, this is a risky deal because maybe there's something I'm missing in my analysis. And so I kept trying to figure out why. Like, why are you guys not investing? Like, why do you think this is a bad idea? And the thing is, like, you just don't get good answers, right? People will tell you, oh, robots just never produced a great outcome before, but that's like extrapolating from the past, right? It's not like understanding the context, which has changed, which is the intelligence was the bottleneck, and the intelligence was going to be solved in a reasonable amount of time, or hey, there's going to be all these safety issues, but like, well, that's true, but the safety issues are solvable. And so yeah, this happens all the time with investing, right? It's just people lean really heavily into thinking by analogy or just like borrowing on concepts that have worked in the past and maybe not appreciating how things could change. Um, and for me, it was like there was a big math component as well, which is like, well, how do you even figure out about like what is the reward piece? Like how if this works, like how big the market can be, because right, nobody's ever commercialized humanoids before, and so you just have to figure it out like yourself, which is like, yeah, well, if humanoids are a thing, then they can replace like, well, they're right? They can work 24/7, 365. They never have to take a break. They never get tired. And so it's going to be more economical than like having a human. We don't even have enough humans anyways to do these jobs. And so they should eventually replace all humans that do the jobs. And the physical labor market is like $50 trillion. It's, more than half of the people in the world are doing physical labor associated jobs. And like what would a robot potentially be priced at? Well, you look at the math, actually like pricing a robot $100,000 in the US or other parts of the world would actually still be really economical. Um, because of right the amount of output it can produce, right? 3 to 4x the output of a human. And also because you can amortize it over, 6 or 7 years. So you could even pay $200,000 for a humanoid and it would actually be economical. But like just even assume you pay $50,000 for a humanoid, and you just assume that hey, look, I'm selling 1 million humanoids. I think that the number that you get to is somewhere between like 5 billion or $50 billion of revenue, and you just kind of like multiply it by 10 and 10 and 10, and right because we have billions of cell phones produced per year and hundreds of millions of cars, and then you get to like the trillions of revenue and tens of trillions of market cap. So. Yeah, from kind of like looking at it from that lens, I realized that okay, this could be like the biggest market in the world. This could be the biggest product in the world. And even and like so I can make this bet and be wrong, 95% of the time or 97% of the time, and it'd still be like a plus EV bet to make. Uh, right? But the math doesn't work out like that exactly because I can't make like I don't have that many situations. And if I'm doing it like, like 20, 50 times or like however much times I have to make that $19 million investment, like I'd be bankrupt like well before like, I invest 50, do that check like 50 times. Um, so like, but like, I think like then we look at the true probability, which I would have ascribed to like somewhere closer to maybe 30 to 50%, which I think maybe like a lot of people would think is crazy. Like, how could you say this startup that has like no revenue and like, barely got the humanoid to walk could have like a 30 to 50% chance of being successful? I think you just like look at the founder and look at the competitive landscape and like you truly understand how special that team and that setup was. And then you think about like, well, there's not just like one scenario for success, right? Like this company doesn't have to be a $5 trillion company for this to be a win. It could be a $50 billion company, right? And it's not that it's a way small outcome, 100 times smaller outcome, but investing at 2 billion, that's still a 25x or whatever, right? And like that could we could have that outcome because there's just so little expertise in these specific domains that are required for a humanoid company that it would actually make sense for like a large tech company to acquire Figure, which like there's a lot of acquisition interest from big tech companies today because they don't have really meaningful humanoid programs internally, and the talent is so sparse and concentrated within a few of these companies in the US. Or, like they could become like a second tier humanoid company and they maybe are worth 200 billion in
Mm.
5 years or 10 years. And that is still an amazing outcome. And so like you have to look at this, like the whole spread of potential outcomes and like the math really started to make sense. Yeah.
So I mean, I love it that the way you are I mean, you do need some sort of conviction, right? Because on the other side, earlier you said there's so many people you were asking like, why not investing when when the math is actually like this? Which brings us to what you guys do today, right? Because this is what you did back then, and what you're now building, or yeah, what you built, what you're now building, is something that is very much related to that, right? Yeah, maybe you can tell us a bit about what you guys have done in the very short time that we've been seeing you, and what you guys planning to do.
Yeah, so the idea behind RoboStrategy is we really expect there to be a lot of growth in the industry, right? I think all of the robotics companies combined in the private markets for this kind of like new wave of physical AI, they're worth 150 billion or so. And we expect this industry to be as large as the AI industry, right? In 10 trillion, tens of trillions plus. And so, but all of that is happening, all the excitement stuff is happening in the private markets, which is what we were, involved with. But at the same time, um, we realized that we needed to kind of scale, and that like we can't write too many of those other like large size checks, and so we could scale by raising privately, which would take a lot of work, right? It's not easy. You have to have like a audited fund track record for years and years to raise. I think like if you want to raise billions of dollars of capital, and I guess like a prop fund we didn't really have that, and it was mostly focused on crypto before. And we saw what happened with MicroStrategy, where MicroStrategy raised something like $50 billion in the public equity markets, right, for the sole intent to buy Bitcoin. And we were like, well, that model probably actually works better for something like leading robotics companies, right, leading private companies. Because the whole reason why MicroStrategy really existed or why it had a value proposition was because there are all these funds and institutions and investors out there that couldn't buy Bitcoin via Coinbase or via ETF because they have mandates, right? You just have so many restrictions and rules in these operating agreements for the funds. Um, and that pool of capital managed by you know, these funds that have these restrictions is enormous. And so like, it was access at the end of the day that drove people to buy MicroStrategy. And if access was the main driver for their kind of growth or their value, then that was 1,000 times, right, more of a factor for private robotics companies where, right, there's no Coinbase for this, there's no ETF. The only way you get access is you invest in a VC fund or you're within that SPV network. And then you have the challenges of like illiquidity, high fees, etc. And so we're like, why don't we just take that model and apply it for robotics? Because we're doing this already and we understand how the model works, which is I guess like not too intuitive for a lot of people, but it's a really attractive model because it gives you an alternative to investing in private investments that is lower fee. It's more liquid, and then you can actually generate additional returns if you're doing this right on top of the actual underlying investment returns, which is basically this like what we call multiple arbitrage or like premium, like accretive premium issuance, which just means like you're selling shares at a you know, higher price than, the what the underlying private markets might value those shares at. But, that premium exists because of the fact that there's a supply and demand imbalance, because there's so much demand for these assets in the public markets, and
Yeah.
it's not gonna change, right? And the supply is very low. And that is not gonna change until these companies go public. And so it was basically a perfect setup for us to execute the MicroStrategy playbook, but on actually like much larger scale.
When we're talking about the different, as you said, there's such a demand, and people really would like to participate in this hype, in this times we're in, where you see every single day in your development and in your company posting their new steps, their new milestone. So how do you actually pick those companies and that make it into your portfolio?
Yeah, the first thing that we look at is we need the market to be really, really big. Because we're a closed-end fund, we don't have a fund life like traditional VC funds, like a 7 or 10 or 12 year fund life. It means we can hold forever, which is, I think, like a really great advantage, because I think the best companies will just kind of keep compounding over time, like Nvidia, right? Just held it for 30 years and done nothing else. And so like we really want to find the next kind of like generational compounders, and to be able to hold them for a long time. But to do that, right, like the market size needs to be very, very large. And so, what companies fall within those categories or within that kind of definition? Well, it's humanoids for sure. They're essentially the GPUs of physical labor. It's industrial robots. You can think about them as the GPUs for industrial labor. Not every single, like, a robot arm by itself with an end effector can be very general purpose. Um, it just doesn't have legs, and not every task needs you to have legs. It's actuators, right? Actuators make up 30 to 50% of the BOM cost of a robot. And maybe it's specific robot applications for, right, welding, for example, where we just find the market to be tremendously large, and it's traditionally not been very automated. I think it's been something like 20% done manually, and 80%, sorry, 20% automated, and 80% done via manual labor and 20% automated. So those are just kind of like some of the examples of companies or segments that we've looked at.
I mean, you were actually talking a little bit about the question that I was about to ask. Like there is a long-term vision of the fund, as you said. There's no end, right? It can be go forever, and so. But I mean, where do you actually see this in like 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, my goal is to invent, if I were to use an analogy, like a new form of SoftBank. I think SoftBank might be something closest to what we're doing today, where they're not exactly regulated as a closed-end fund, but they pretty much are an investment company that is investing a lot into private technology companies, and they're doing it at massive scale. And so that's kind of what we hope to do in the future, is reach that scale, so that founders, when they're raising their next round, this is one of the most painful parts of building robotics companies, is some of the fundraising, right? Because a lot of investors don't understand the space really well. It's very capital intensive, so you have to fundraise a lot. And I'm dealing with that right now. You got to say the same thing over and over. Um, and so, like, hopefully we can just reach that scale where, hey, if the founders really want to do the next round, and we believe them, and we've seen them execute, and we believe this is a company we want to continue to double down on, then they can just call us, and we will do, most of it, if not all of it, for them. Um, might be kind of like the financier that they have on call, but then also support them through a lot of the other competencies that we're building through, our research platform, through a policy arm, through our marketing engine as well, right? Because these companies want to sell millions of robots, then they need a lot of people to know about them and to be aware of them and to be excited about buying them. So that's kind of the long-term goal. Is to it's like, yes, like SoftBank is maybe like a little bit of an analogy, but I think we will almost create like a new pathway for venture capital formation to occur. As in, you will likely see other venture funds looking to go public as a way to scale, because, right, like sometimes it can be very difficult in the private markets to even just raise $1 billion.
I mean, and I mean, I'm still in Europe, so these numbers, like I said earlier, are still there's not too many companies that have the ability, at least in Europe, to raise this amount of money, even in that time, even in those times. But I mean, if you look at the let's say broader robotics, physical AI industry, and how it is evolving over the last, I don't know, 3 years, and you talk to and you are investing, right, into these kind of companies. So you talk to founders, you see the demos, you see the products. So in where this is evolving, I mean, you were saying earlier, more and more funds will adopt the strategy that you're going to. But do you think that because you're so early, this will be, yeah, one of the advantage, or like you said, for example, the marketing side, I think you have a great
Yeah.
guy, and also the research part. These are the things that will be a differentiator.
Yeah, look, I think a lot of people are going to try to replicate this strategy, but doesn't mean a lot of them are going to work. So, you look at there's a few other publicly traded venture vehicles out there, and I would look at them a little bit differently because they're not structured in the same way, as in like they don't plan to continue to raise capital in the same vehicle and to grow the fund base, for basically forever, right? They look more like holdings vehicles where they just, they've made 10 to 20 investments and then they plan to let those mature and then launch fund two and three, et cetera. And to like make this work, right? You have to have a premium on your NAV, which means you need to have assets that people want to buy. And you have to have assets that are not going public anytime soon and that, you can tell a story about that, you know, is compelling as to, why we've made good investments. And that, right, is something that is maybe not everybody can do. Um, you need somebody with, right, like with a track record that has made good investments in that particular field in the past. You have to have the distribution, right, like there's so many companies and VCs out there that produce really good content. It's very high quality, but they don't know how to distribute and just nobody sees it, right? It's almost a waste. And like that is something that like we've really honed in, right? Because we have, you think about engineers for humanoids, but we have engineers for like attention, right? Like how do we get people thinking about robotics and what we're doing on like a consistent basis, and like how do we do that not just across X, but across like all the different platforms that people get information on. And yeah, it's fun because there's a lot of white space in robotics for marketing and like awareness because it's just like the robots themselves are so attention grabbing and inherently viral, right? Like you can have them cooking and cleaning and playing basketball, doing parkour stunts, whatever. Yeah, there's a lot of white space. You can do a lot in front that makes this part more fun and then also just like more viable as like a venture model for us.
Yeah, I mean yeah, I mean, to be honest, I mean, I'm not playing on your level, obviously, but I mean, this is what I'm interested in, and this is what I do, right? So this is one of my favorite topics.
Mm.
So I can really relate. I mean, thank you so much. As I do know, there's a lot of people who would like to talk to you and getting and understanding how things work for you and how do you do things. Um, as we're coming towards the end of the podcast, is there something that you would like to say that you think would be interested, but normally this is not something. I mean, I said this to you earlier, right? When we started the podcast, this is not the typical technical podcast. We get now at the end at the technologies of the company, but I'm always trying to show the people behind the technology and behind the companies, right? So if there's, and this is also some, I don't know, some sort of school where people can see, okay, this is how these people become who they are, and this is how they build the things they build, right? Is there anything, I mean, it seems very cliche, but is there anything when you look back that made a huge impact and where you think, if I could knew this earlier on, this would have been great, or if there's something that you would like to give entrepreneurs, researchers, I mean, I don't know how you see yourself or describe yourself that you would like to give and share.
No, maybe just like be very curious, try to learn about the world as much as you can, and don't be satisfied for surface level answers. I wouldn't say it's like question everything in the sense that like you really question everything and it's like annoying and you're
Mm.
doing it for the purpose of like questioning everything, but like like do try to think a little bit about when things don't make sense, and I think it'll be a good opportunity to improve your knowledge around different subjects and also to improve your understanding of the world and like almost kind of like train yourself how to learn. Learning how to learn it maybe is like quite an important skill set.
I mean, you're right, but I think curiosity helps here, right? To
Hmm.
learn how to learn. If you're really interested in something, you dig deeper, and if you're not giving
Hmm.
up so easily,
Yeah.
yeah, I think. Thank you so much, Andrew, for taking the time and giving us an insight in how things were back then and how things for you are now and how things will be for maybe all of us if we would like to participate in this. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the time.
Mm. Then goodbye and take care.